Hello everyone! Here's another overdue review of something I've been meaning to talk about for a long time. Actually, I have talked about it once or twice before, but that was brief. So today I want to do a full-scale review of the 1990 made-for-TV adaptation of The Phantom of the Opera, directed by Tony Richardson and starring Charles Dance, Teri Polo, and Burt Lancaster. Charles Dance plays the Phantom, known more familiarly as Eric, who's been secretly running the show at the Paris Opera for years with the willing compliance of manager Gerard Carrière, Burt Lancaster. But when Carrière is bought out by new manager Coletti and his ambitious wife Carlotta, gone is the old peace and quiet, and Eric must reassert himself to maintain anonymity and protect his domain. Meanwhile, a poor singer named Christine, Teri Polo, has come to the opera, having been promised lessons there by a certain patron, unaware of the sudden change in management. Christine is turned away, but the sympathetic doorman takes pity on her, finding her a place in the opera house to live, and helping her get a job as Carlotta's new costume girl. The Phantom overhears her singing one night, and, inspired by the pure quality of her voice, approaches her, offering to train her voice so that she may assume the prima donna role Carlotta is keeping for herself. Those familiar with the novel, or almost any adaptation of it, will recognize the usual Phantom of the Opera ingredients, but this version also makes some significant changes, especially in its latter half, and I'll discuss those later in this review. The script is based partially on the novel by Gaston Leroux, which has been adapted umpteen times, but also on the Yeston Coppet musical. The average person only knows about one Phantom of the Opera musical, but there are actually several, and for this quick history recap, I'm going to mention three. The musical theater team of composer-lyricist Maury Yeston and writer Arthur Coppet was approached in 1983 by Geoffrey Holder, who had the idea to adapt Gaston Leroux's novel into a musical. And Holder had already obtained the rights from Leroux's estate for the purpose of adapting the book into a US-based musical within 2 years. One Phantom-based musical already existed, Ken Hill's British adaptation, which came out in the 70s and enjoyed a modest revival in England in 1984. Undeterred by that, Yeston, Coppet, and Holder proceeded with their plans for a Broadway Phantom. Even after Andrew Lloyd Webber, who had also seen Ken Hill's revival, came out with his show in 1986, they were still going to go ahead with what they knew would be a very different interpretation of the book. They had almost completed their work when it was announced that Lloyd Webber's raging West End success would be adapted for Broadway. With that news, Yeston and Coppet's investors backed out, and the project was abandoned, temporarily. Jump to 1987, after the premiere of a 2-part miniseries that Coppet had adapted for NBC was well received, NBC contacted him about doing another project. Coppet had a talk with Yeston, who gave him the go-ahead to rework their Phantom script, minus Yeston's musical numbers, into a teleplay, which was adapted into this 2-part miniseries that aired in 1990. Following that success, interest in a musical version resurfaced, and at last Phantom got to premiere in 1991, not on Broadway as originally intended, but in Houston. It's never gotten a Broadway premiere, and as long as the ALW show is still kicking, it probably never will. But it does have its own strong and loyal fan base, and there have been at least 1,000 regional and international productions. Now that we've gotten that obligatory history lesson out of the way, let's actually talk about this thing. I really like this, we'll call it a movie. I always have. In fact, I think it might be the first adaptation of The Phantom of the Opera that I saw in its entirety. Maybe. I feel like I had seen clips of Chaney's and Rain's Phantoms, heard songs from the ALW musical, heard Leroux's book on tape, and read Phantoms Don't Drive Sports Cars, all before I was 8 or 9 years old. It's just that my memory has gotten fuzzy about the timing, the exact timing of everything. But I do know that I was well aware of the main phantom-y things, the quintessential imagery, when I saw this for the first time. I'm also pretty sure that this was one of the first DVDs that we acquired, and that happened because my mom was buying just about every Charles Dance movie that she could find. Hi, Mom! I am quite familiar with this adaptation, its pros and cons, its twists and variations on the original story. When I did a video about my 4 favorite Phantom films a few years ago, this was one of the 4, so it goes without saying that I think it has several points in its favor. For one thing, it was actually filmed, at least in part, at the real Paris Opera House, the Palais Garnier, and for Phantom fans, especially the really intense Phantom fans, that's like... Constructed between 1861 and 1875 and designed by Charles Garnier, the Théâtre National de l'Opéra is now used primarily for the staging of ballets, but it continues to be a national monument and a must-see for tourists. Is it too late to explain that I never took any French classes, so I'm going to be doing my best with the pronunciations here? Scenes from Leroux's novel were specifically inspired by the design of the Palais Garnier, with its statue of Apollo and his lyre at its pinnacle, its prestigious and lush auditorium with the largest stage in Europe, its many corridors and little alcoves, its enormous chandelier, and its mysterious watery sublevels, which Leroux turned into a subterranean lake that the Phantom traversed to access his underground lair. Though I don't believe the entire film was shot on location, and I am no expert on which scenes were filmed there and which were not, the film, especially with its being a period piece, is still a great indirect way to take in the unique architectural design. Adding to its overall authenticity, over the course of the film, scenes from certain operas are rehearsed and performed. Now, you don't have to like opera to be a Phantom of the Opera fan, but if you do like opera, I think you can eke more enjoyment out of it. And I do think it's essential to include at least a little opera in a Phantom of the Opera film. This one embraces the backstage culture, the hustle and bustle, the egos, the camaraderie, the nervous excitement and last-minute panic to get everything just right before the actors go on. It takes a lot of people to put on large-scale productions, and the Opera House is like its own little city. The script strikes a decent balance of comedy and tragedy. In the first half especially, there's a sense of fun. Things will get serious, but we're not there yet.
What kind of horror are you leaving me in?
True, some of the comedy is a bit odd, even a little goofy, but the unusual delivery itself of certain lines can be humorous. We also have an enjoyable cast of characters. Coletti and Carlotta are a high-strung pair. Coletti is played by Ian Richardson, a strange bit of casting I hadn't appreciated before because I'd never realized who it was behind the Salvador Dali-esque mustache. It was really his voice that I was able to recognize. I've listened to his recording of I've Grown Accustomed to Her Face from My Fair Lady a number of times in the past year and a half, so it was his voice I recognized more than anything else. The way he looks and acts here is certainly different from any other performance I've seen from him. Eric repeatedly makes a fool of Coletti, not that it takes much effort, while Carlotta becomes his particular nemesis. First because she's determined to ruin his opera company by starring in every production, and second because she goes after Christine with a vengeance. Carlotta is marvelously overplayed by Andrea Ferreal. Her Carlotta is both malicious and ingratiating, a true diva. What I enjoy most are her outrageous facial expressions in the middle of her most humiliating moments.
Her debut was a disaster.
Oh, that's too bad.
Another French star featured in this film is Jean-Pierre Cassel as Inspector Ledoux. He's a solid side character, hired by Coletti to track down this so-called Phantom, so he's working for the new manager, but consulting with the old manager behind his back, and often struggling and failing to hold back his laughter when some absurd misfortune befalls the new employers. In the book, Christine's love interest is Raoul, the Vicomte de Chagny. He is a naive young man, and his elder brother Philippe, the Comte de Chagny, has to try to get him out of trouble. unsuccessfully. Coppitt's script pulls a little switcheroo, getting rid of Raoul and replacing him with his elder brother Philippe. Adam Stork plays the role, doing the best he can with what admittedly is the least interesting character. He does have a minor arc, though, as a playboy who's promised voice lessons to quite a few girls in the chorus, but then he reforms his rakish ways out of love for Christine. Theirs is not an insta-love either. It's revealed in a flashback that they knew each other years ago, and not only were they friends, they enjoyed playing music together until they were forcibly separated. So passion for music is something she shares with both Philippe and Eric. At first, Philippe doesn't recognize her, but once Christine's identity is made clear, I give Philippe credit for being unfailingly loyal to her, though he is jealous and bitter when she speaks of her feelings for Eric. I imagine jealousy is a hitherto foreign concept, and it doesn't look good on him. Still, he's not a bad guy, not really deserving of some of the hate he gets, and they have a meaningful history. When I was little, I had no clue who Burt Lancaster was. I just knew he was somebody because it was his name that showed up first in the credits, and my mom said, "Burt Lancaster, he's famous." Now I've seen him in a whole bunch of movies, and so I can appreciate that this was kind of a different role for him. Reviews at the time this came out praised his performance, saying his presence adds dignity and weight to the film. I agree. Not that it would be a frothy mess without him, but his character helps distinguish the adaptation, and his relationship with Eric, I think, is the real heart and soul of the story. More about that in a couple minutes. I've always felt Teri Polo's Christine is one of the best. For one thing, she looks right, there just aren't enough blonde Christines, and her overall expression is just right for the character. On top of that, her portrayal is better developed than some others. We see her go through a variety of experiences, good ones and bad ones, which shape and mold her character. The one thing that kind of bothers me is that there are a few times they have her say, "Please, if you love me." That's a phrase that always bothers me when it shows up in a movie. I feel like it's a false oversimplification. If this person doesn't do what you want, it doesn't mean he doesn't love you. This is just kind of a pet peeve of mine. This Christine Daae is not quite as ethereal and emotionally on edge as the one in the book is. She has more humble roots and is more realistic and relatable, which I think helps balance out her sweetness. She's still the good angel, but she's a genuine person, too. This is probably a good time to mention the singing. Teri Polo, Charles Dance, and Andrea Ferrell were dubbed. I know that bothers some people, and once upon a time I was disappointed that these actors didn't do their own singing, but I don't have an issue with it now. I'm much more likely to fuss when someone is cast in a major role in a musical and they don't do their own singing through the entire movie, since there are so many people who can act and sing who would have loved to play the part. But this isn't a musical. It's a drama that's got a few scenes where characters sing, and they have to sing very well. Teri Polo is dubbed by Michel Lagrange. Christine's voice is supposed to be superlative, a voice of such unique quality, even untrained, that Eric would want to risk everything by coming forward to teach her, a voice he's been searching for his whole life. I believe Eric's voice should also be uniquely beautiful, though nothing is said about it in the film. Leroux makes a big deal about his singing. He has a pure, high, unearthly voice, and I end up comparing every phantom I hear sing to the voice I imagine in my mind. And I'm quite pleased that they cast a tenor, Gerard Garino, who has a lovely voice, to do the singing for Charles Dance. Carlotta's singing is also dubbed by Halia Tazan, who does a good job sounding bad, demonstrating how excessive volume and power and vibrato do not make up for deficiencies in tone, pitch, and dynamics. She has to sound awful on purpose, which is a thankless job, but she nails it. I've always really enjoyed Charles Dance's performance here. This phantom is not a monster, nor is he a mysterious, quasi-supernatural figure. He's not exactly threatening, and as the opera ghost, his warnings are understated and rather calm. His acts are more like pranks than evil deeds, until things start to escalate. The first scene with him might take you aback. It's surprising just that we're introduced to him so early, and his conversation with Gerard Carrière is peppered with so many quirky one-liners.
I'm just not used to killing people. It's thrown me off a bit.
The thing is, Yeston and Coppet sought to portray Eric, and that's Eric with a K. In Phantom, it's always Eric with a K. They sought to portray him as a very human individual with whom the audience would sympathize, someone who expresses exasperation and amusement, who loves and loses, who feels Christine's successes and failures keenly. Hey, Editing Weaselberry here. I'd just like to add that while some viewers might raise an eyebrow at the portrayal of the Phantom as a romantic and a humorous man, Gaston Leroux's Eric was kind of like that in the original novel. The OG had romantic yearnings and a sensitive, emotional side when he wasn't being, insane, and he also had some very funny lines. Well, I always thought they were funny. So while this Eric may seem unusual compared to other Phantoms, the characterization does have roots in its source material. Speaking for myself, if the Phantom doesn't have an offbeat sense of humor and isn't madly in love with Christine, I kind of feel like, what are we doing here? And the emphasis on these traits is part of what makes Charles Dance's Eric so endearing and so entertaining to watch.
I know what to do about it. I'll kill them both.
Oh, come on now.
I'm teasing. Probably the only one I need to kill is her.
Since the mask covers most of his face, Dance has to find other ways to emote. So this is another case where you have to pay attention not just to his heavily shaded eyes and the exposed part of his face, but to his voice, his posture, and his body language. He also apparently lives in his evening clothes, looking rather dapper for someone lurking in the dark. He has a collection of decorative masks for special occasions and special emotions, and off-camera, he briefly plays the flute. The relationship between Eric and Christine is so different here. Everything, how they meet and the bond that develops between them. Eric approaches her like a gentleman. He's polite, clear, a little nervous, eager to maintain distance. He has an answer for everything, his mask, his secrecy. I do wish that we saw some actual singing lessons, but I love that they have quiet times together. He's not just a taskmaster forcing her to keep on singing until she almost collapses. They converse, they enjoy each other's company between songs. There's an informality to their relationship that's almost shocking. It's so unlike any other version that's been committed to film. They have a rapport, and he's the closest thing she has to a friend. She doesn't know that his feelings run deeper than that. He does say some complimentary, borderline romantic things, but she doesn't catch on. And then when she does offer a warm response, he's like, whoa, she's touching me, what do I do? They're also relatively honest with each other. He thoughtfully apologizes for offending her by questioning the motives behind Philippe's interest, and she confesses to lying about what happened after the bistro. That is one part I dislike, when she runs off with Philippe for hours, even though she came with Eric and she knows he's waiting for her and they have this big moment to talk about. It makes her seem ungrateful to not at least be like, hey, I can't leave with you, I have to see someone. But she got carried away with the moment, and she's not really ungrateful. We know that because of how upset she is when she realizes she's hurt him. And in a way, her apologizing makes their bond even stronger. I think it's also important to note that later, when Eric whisks her away, rescuing her from a humiliating stage debut and bringing her to his home, she goes willingly, without being hypnotized or drugged or dragged like happens in most other versions. Not that she isn't bewildered and asking questions, but she trusts him to take care of her. That happens after the chandelier scene, which is great, Instead of Eric messing with Carlotta's voice, Carlotta, who may not be a great singer herself but recognizes when someone else has had coaching, messes with Christine's voice. Horrified by the audience's jeers, Eric goes all Jack Torrance on the rope holding up the chandelier until it comes crashing down, an exciting end to part 1. Something slips in his mind when that dream for her debut is ruined. We start to get a clearer picture of things when we explore his world, with its eerie atmosphere and weird prop piles. Eric seems to be forcing a jovial mood, which indicates he's probably nervous having her there, but he's also kind of delusional. The conversation they have in this scene doesn't make any sense. What changes everything, as usual, is the unmasking scene, but they don't do it in the usual way. Typically, Christine has just come out of some sort of trance and has discovered that the disembodied voice / angel / ghost of her father that's been teaching her is actually a flesh and blood human being who lives underground. Needing to know his true identity, she yanks off his mask and is confronted with a hideous deformity and an even more hideous temper. Here, Christine is more in the know. She hasn't been deluded, she's had lots of time alone with him, she's been informed about the real reason why he wears a mask, and she asks to see his face, knowing he's deformed and earnestly believing that she can handle it. And then... Admittedly, Eric's behavior on their picnic in the fake forest populated with fake animals is bizarre, but it could have been a nice enough time, in spite of that, if she hadn't been so persistent and invoked his mother's memory and reasoned that if his mother who loved him could look at his face without fear, then so can she, which is a terribly misleading thing to say. He reluctantly removes his mask, she stares at his face in silent horror, and passes out like Sleeping Beauty. Heartbroken, Eric staggers away from the scene, and the next time we see him, he's on a Citizen Kane-like rampage, destroying his lair and adamant that now she's seen his face, she can never leave. Now that's a little more like the Phantom most people are familiar with. The decision to not show his face is a controversial one, and it is a little disappointing after the big build-up, and it's kind of a cop-out when just about every other version has had to give it a go. But on the flip side, I think what I am capable of imagining, a face so horrible that Christine can't even make a sound, and stops breathing, and faints in terror, is worse than any believable makeup they could have pulled off. So I'm okay with this decision. They do give us a vague hint in flashbacks with some faraway shots of him as a little boy, but that's the most we get. I gotta talk about another controversial thing, but this is a spoiler, so consider yourself warned. After Christine's been brought underground, but before the unmasking, Gerard comes to try to convince her to leave with him. He reveals that he is, in fact, Eric's father, and he knows that Eric is drawn to Christine because her voice reminds him of his mother's. And it's not just her voice. In the backstory sequence that unfolds here, Teri Polo also plays his mother, Belladova. I am not a fan of this choice, and a lot of people feel the same way. For one thing, it allows for the whispered suggestion of an Oedipus complex. Bleh. Also, I think it lessens somewhat the strength of their connection, because now it's not just about her, it's about his mother, and the resemblance, and her voice. And one thing that I love about the relationship here is that he loves her. He's not just obsessed with her voice, as it is in some other adaptations where it's like, okay, well, he loves her voice, he doesn't really care that much about her as a person. Making hers the same face and the same voice that he remembers singing to him when he was a baby, just kind of chips away from that, and I don't like it. It would have been preferable to just cast someone who resembles Teri Polo, if that's something they wanted to suggest. Cast someone who looks a little bit like her, and have Michel Lagrange dub her singing as well. Then you could have had that element and it would be okay. It wouldn't be so bad. Because using the same actress makes it kind of squicky. It's a little too on the nose, and it even kind of implies that Christine and his mother were related, which, yikes, that's not the direction we want to go in. So I don't care for the whole she's just like his mom element. But I do like the father-son reveal and what they do with it, as far away as it is from what Leroux came up with. And I love the resolution of that relationship that comes in the last act. The tete-a-tete between them is one of the sweetest moments. That might also be my favorite number in the musical version, You Are My Own, which is a moving duet between Eric and Gerard. I love the entire final act of this film. There are many scenes I love throughout the thing, like the scene where Carlotta's making her debut as Norma, but the Phantoms put something in her wig to make it itchy, which is hilarious. There's a quick moment that I'd completely forgotten about since the last time I saw this, when Eric nearly runs into Christine in the dark backstage, and he has to quickly pull back, and he almost has a heart attack, the poor guy. Could have changed the whole movie right there. And the scene where Christine and Carlotta compete with each other at the bistro, with Carlotta showing she has no poker face, while Eric listens anxiously outside. When it's over and Christine has triumphed, his relief and pride are evident in the way his gloved hands are gripping his stick and his eyes glitter in the dark. But my favorite scene, one of my favorite scenes in any Phantom adaptation, and one of my favorite scenes, period, is the performance of the prison scene from Faust. There's so much going on, and yes, I have talked about this once before, at least once, but I'm always on board to talk in depth about this scene, so if you'll indulge me for a couple minutes. Christine's managed to escape from Eric and has been in Philippe's care, but she knows she betrayed Eric's trust and feels sick about it, convinced, rightfully so, that he's dying. Intent on making things right, she gets the manager to stage Faust with her in the role of Marguerite again, hoping Eric will hear her singing and come up. She does not know that Inspector Ledoux is plotting to capture him if he appears. Though he is sick, Eric does hear her way down in the basement and starts making his way up to box 5, moving so slowly that you're worried he's not going to make it before the thing is over. He does make it, though, just in time for scenes 5 and 6 of the final act, the prison scene, trio, and finale. I happen to really like Gounod's Faust, especially the ending when it's done right, and I think this scene in the film has even greater meaning and effect when you know what it is they're singing. So, quick summary for context. In Charles Gounod's opera, Faust, an aging scholar who's tried to kill himself, makes a bargain with Mephistopheles the devil, signing over his soul in exchange for Mephistopheles making him young again and hooking him up. The now young and handsome Faust falls for the pure and modest Marguerite, seducing her and then abandoning her with a baby. A social outcast, she goes mad and kills her child. Time passes, things happen, not pertinent to this discussion. Faust and Mephistopheles arrive at the prison cell where Marguerite awaits execution, urging her to leave with them before it's too late. Marguerite recognizes her lover, but she's delusional, and resists his increasingly desperate pleas to come away with him. When she recognizes the devil, she prays to God and his angels for forgiveness and deliverance. The opera ends with a celestial chorus as Mephistopheles brings the condemned Faust back with him to hell, and Marguerite's redeemed spirit ascends to heaven. Now back to the Phantom of the Opera. Christine, playing Marguerite, wakes at the sound of Faust calling her name, and they're playing the scene like normal, and she rises, and then... I never caught this before until I watched the scene repeatedly and listened very closely with headphones, but the fourth time Faust calls her name, there's a second voice. Christine eagerly turns away from Faust and walks toward box 5, where we see Eric standing in the shadow of the curtain. Christine begins singing to him, Oui, c'est toi, je t'aime. Oui, c'est toi, je t'aime. which means, yes, it's you, I love you. He emerges into plain sight as she continues singing words that mean, the fetters, death himself no longer scare me. You found me, now I am safe, it's you, I'm next to your heart. Which sounds so much better when it's sung in French, trust me. Then when Faust is supposed to come in and echo her declaration of love, Eric starts singing instead, and the audience and other actors are dumbfounded. Someone's singing from box 5. Also, remember that Eric is dying and was coughing all the way up there, but he's mustering all his strength to sing with Christine, and though they're surrounded by hundreds of people, they're singing for no one but each other, the lyrics heavy with significance. Yes, it's I love you, despite even the efforts of the jeering demon, I have found you, you are safe, here I am, come next to my heart. Inspector Ledoux recognizes that this is an important, meaningful moment and holds his men back. Philippe also recognizes what's going on and looks kind of sick. There is a little artistic license taken here, some lines cut so they can jump to Mephistopheles' Alerta, Alerta, and the beautiful climactic trio that follows. I love how the actors just roll with it. Faust mouthing his part and letting Eric sing, and Mephistopheles playing to Christine and Eric. The show must go on, and they've got to realize this is great theater. In context, Mephistopheles and Faust are insisting Marguerite come with them, and Marguerite is praying for forgiveness and deliverance, but with these lyrics, Christine, hands uplifted, is pleading for Eric to pardon her and not abandon her, and Eric is urging her to, viens, come, follow him, let's leave together. It's 6 minutes or so of perfection, the singing from Gérard Garino and Michel Lagrange, and the acting from Charles Dance and Teri Polo, the look on her face, the look on his face. The music crescendos and the audience jumps to their feet while Eric and Christine bask in the exhilaration of the moment and the declaration of their feelings. And I'm somewhere between crying and cheering. I love this scene so much. Eric ends up jumping onto the stage and carrying Christine up to the roof where everyone follows them, and this leads to the finale, which is a tragic ending, but well played. Eric saving Philippe instead of killing him, asking his father to shoot him so he won't get taken alive, lying cradled in his arms while Christine ignores his feeble protest and removes his mask and kisses him on the forehead. It feels right, as sad as it is, and anyway, as Bugs Bunny would say, what did you expect in an opera? A happy ending? This TV movie won 2 of the 5 Emmys it was nominated for, 1 for art direction and 1 for hairstyling. And I must say, the hair is something. I'm talking about Christine's, but also Philippe's. I've always wished my hair could have perfect curls like that. I also must put in a good word for John Addison, who wrote a nice music score. There's an otherworldly theme for Eric's lair that echoes Christine's sense of wonder when she first sees it, and there's a heavier theme that opens the film, channeling a gothic mood that matches the eerie close-ups of the statues. Not that this is a particularly scary film. It does have its effectively dark moments, it has some morbid humor, and there's a body that appears and disappears, but overall, this isn't a phantom film that fits in the horror genre. There isn't much more to say, really. I am extremely fond of this version, though there are a few narrative choices I don't like so much. They're not crucial enough to diminish my positive reaction. I enjoy the scenery and the spectacle, the comedy and the sorrow, and the performances of a great cast that's pulling together to put a different spin on a familiar tale. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for taking the extra time to listen to me enthuse about this adaptation. If you have seen this version of The Phantom of the Opera, I would love to know what you think of it, so go ahead and share your take down below. I look forward to reading your comments as always, and I'll be back soon. Thanks for watching.